easy to know?
Interestingly, this is one that my opinion has changed on a bit over the years. Let's dive into it and see why. Whether or not aliens have visited Earth, one thing is for certain, a lot of Americans at least believe they have. Now, of course, figures vary quite a bit from study to study and survey to survey, but 50 to 75% of American adults believe in extraterrestrial life beyond our planet. And a 2021 Pew Research survey found that 65% of Americans believe in specifically intelligent life. And 30-some to 40% of Americans believe not only that they exist out there, but that they visited us here. In modern times, people report sightings of strange alien spacecraft, particularly interesting when they are observed doing things that nothing that we have on Earth at this time are capable of doing. And on occasion, they have photos or videos of these alleged alien spacecraft. But we also have reports of alien abductions, although they usually are lacking in evidence. But if you talk to the believers, it's not just a modern thing, but something that has been reported throughout history. Allegedly, there are ancient drawings and ancient writings that describe and depict alien visitations, witnesses of alien spacecraft. Some have even interpreted biblical scriptures as being descriptions of ancient UFO sightings. There's even ancient astronaut theorists that assert that early primitive humans couldn't make things like the Great Pyramids and were helped by or influenced by aliens, and often the extraterrestrials may even have influenced the rise of civilization in the first place. I feel like before we tackle whether or not aliens have been here, maybe we should begin with what I feel is the beginning and establish, do aliens even exist in the first place? Because I think it stands to solid reason that if they don't exist, they haven't been here. The universe is mind-bogglingly massive. Now, I find the universe very fascinating, and when you start to research it, you start getting into numbers that are on scales that are hard for us to comprehend. Small numbers we deal with all the time in our day-to-day life. 1, we get. 5, 10, 20, we understand, we can visualize that. But as the numbers start gaining extra digits, they start getting a lot harder for us to wrap our minds around. I understand that the next town is 7 miles over. I get 7 miles because I've driven that trip many times. But by the time that we're talking about the Earth having a circumference of 24,901 miles, I get that number, but I don't really get that number. It's really hard for me to visualize that big of a number. Then when you get to the distance from Earth to the Moon at 238,900 miles, that's even harder for me to wrap my head around. Then when we start getting into the distance to the Sun, to various planets in our own solar system, to the Kuiper Belt, the numbers are just mind-boggling. And that's just limiting it to our own solar system. What about when we get into our galaxy? Our own home galaxy, the Milky Way, is estimated to have between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. Unfortunately for life, though, the universe is a terribly dangerous place. It is full of all kinds of insane extremes that really want to make sure that life is dead and stays that way. Unfortunately for the universe, life can be pretty stubborn and occasionally finds a place hospitable enough for it to call home. However, while we don't yet have the means of exploring the universe and visually verifying the life that's there, we're most likely talking about microbes, bacteria, and viruses. These will exist in places that more advanced life can't manage to survive. And even if more complex life forms could exist somewhere, they will start from bacteria first. The vast majority of the universe would consist of extremes, like really intense heat, really frigid cold, intense pressures, high acidity, high toxicity, 1,000-mile-an-hour winds. So when life can manage to find a way, it's usually going to be barely scraping by as microbes. Now, I would say that these microbes aren't going to be building spaceships and visiting Earth, but there is a theory of panspermia, whereby life hitches a ride on a comet or an asteroid from another star system. So the idea here is that life exists throughout the universe and can hitch a ride from one solar system to another. So through panspermia, life on Earth could have originated elsewhere, or we could have had life here and then additional life come to us from afar. Now I tried to find some kind of figures, some kind of guesstimates from experts, and I couldn't really find anything quotable. So let's just say that across our galaxy, 1% of solar systems have some kind of a body, a planet or a moon or whatever, that's capable of harboring at least basic microbial life. That would then give us 1 to 4 billion solar systems harboring at least bacteria. But how many of those worlds would be hospitable enough for life to advance beyond just microbes? I would imagine that only a small percentage of those life-bearing worlds would be able to see life advance into something like worms and some plants and insects. I would imagine that larger, more complex, more intelligent life would be a lot more rare still, and then even fewer of those would be able to advance to a civilization of some kind. Looking to our own planet as an example, humans aren't the only intelligent life form on the planet, but we are the only one that was able to pair that with hands with opposable thumbs that we can use to grasp and to make tools for our survival. So Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and in all that time, and out of all the innumerable species that have been here, only one has managed to make it to civilization. And that doesn't bode well for the chances of intelligent, advanced life out there. Even so, it just simply implies that advanced, intelligent civilizations are probably very rare, but still out there. For example, revisiting the notion of trying to come up with statistics for all this. For example, plugging numbers into formulas like the Drake equation. Some estimates put the possibility in the ballpark of 1 in 60 billion with a B. Now, as bad as that sounds, bear in mind the estimates are 100 to 400 billion stars in our galaxy. So that could potentially open the door for up to 6 civilizations in our galaxy. Then bear in mind that we're definitely not the only galaxy, there's countless more. Now if we take a moment to stop and consider... What are you doing?
I'm just trying to keep it light.
Okay, I guess moving on. So having established that there's almost certainly life out there, possibly advanced life, perhaps the next step is, can they get here somehow? Because logically, if they can't get here, then they haven't been here. Now, extraterrestrial visitors couldn't have come here from our own solar system because our solar system kind of sucks. I mean, there are some places in our solar system where there could possibly be life, but we're talking microbes only. Even just our own solar system is huge from our perspective, but a trip here from any other solar system would be particularly impressive. That's because the distance to Proxima Centauri, our nearest neighbor, is roughly 25.3 trillion miles away. So even at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, it would take roughly 4.25 years to get there. Now, the chances that the nearest solar system that happens to be habitable for intelligent life just happens to be Proxima Centauri is not very good. So realistically, visitors are going to be coming to us from much farther. Even if they're coming to us just from our own galaxy, our galaxy, bear in mind, is massive, being around 600 quadrillion miles across. So even at the astronomical speed of light, it would take 100,000 years to cross our entire galaxy. Now granted, these hypothetical alien visitors might not be coming from the far opposite end of the galaxy, but they still might be making a trip of 500, 1,000, 10,000 light years. So we're talking about a monumental undertaking on their part. And it's not just a huge commitment of time, but of resources. Without diving too deep into the physics of it, as an object's speed increases, its kinetic energy and momentum increase. As this happens, the amount of energy it takes to accelerate it further dramatically increases. According to special relativity, the closer that an object gets to the speed of light, the amount of energy required to accelerate it becomes infinitely large. Alright, so for the sake of argument, we'll assume that through their advanced technology they've mastered infinite energy so that they're capable of propelling a vehicle at almost the speed of light. Let's say 99% of the speed of light. So in our hypothetical scenario, they've overcome the obstacle of unlimited resources for this unlimited power. They'd still have to commit the tremendous time investment in getting here. And I don't know where they'd be coming from, but it's almost guaranteed to be a tremendous amount of time. Even if they were coming from Proxima Centauri and at 99% of the speed of light, it would take them over 4.25 years to get here, albeit maybe just over. But the chances of Proxima Centauri having a planet that could inhabit these life forms is astronomical. Realistically, going with the probability of maybe just a few potential civilizations out there in the entire galaxy, we're probably looking at hundreds or even thousands of light years to get here. So even at virtually the speed of light, we're still looking at hundreds or even thousands of years to get here. So for what purpose would they commit all this time? I mean, considering the hundreds of billions of stars in the galaxy, why pick this one unless you knew in advance that there was probably something here? Okay, fine, maybe they did know. I mean, if they're more advanced than us that they can be able to get here in the first place, then they must have more advanced technology for detecting stuff. So maybe they knew that our world was potential for like habitation and maybe even detected that we're probably here. I mean, imagine it from their perspective. If you know that this planet probably has life, is at least habitable, maybe even know that we're here, and then commit to come all the way here, why? I mean, that's a pretty huge undertaking even for them, just to come here and do what? Abduct a few drunken rednecks and poke around with their butt for a bit and maybe gank a couple cattle? I would imagine in this scenario that they came here because they want our world. And I would imagine if they had the means to get here, then they wouldn't see us as a threat and would have no problem taking it from us. But maybe it wasn't such a huge time investment because maybe they've mastered faster than light travel, or FTL. Well, unfortunately, while that's popular in sci-fi, especially older sci-fi, we know a little bit more now, we're pretty confident, based on what we understand so far, that you can't travel faster than the speed of light. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't loopholes, workarounds that we could maybe come up with, as we've seen in Star Trek and video games like Mass Effect. So one possibility is warping space-time around our vessel. So in this case, rather than us traveling at impossible speeds, we're bending the universe around us to our will, compressing space-time in front of our vessel and expanding it behind us. Another popular notion is maybe going through a hypothetical wormhole. Now, for folks that aren't familiar with wormholes, or at least not the physics or science behind the idea, I'll try to cover the gist of it in the easiest way I know how. So imagine you have a sheet of paper laying on the table in front of you, and that flat sheet of paper represents the three-dimensional universe. Now let's draw dots on either end of the paper. And let's say that you're in a vessel at one of those dots and you would like to get to the other dot, but it would take a tremendous amount of time to travel across that paper to that other dot. Now, roll up, kind of bending the paper in half, not folding it, but bending it around until the two dots are close to each other. Then imagine punching a hole through those two dots and your hypothetical ship flying through those holes from one dot location to the other. This dramatically shortened the trip that you had to take. Now, there's going to be folks that already understand this and it makes perfectly good sense to them, but if this is a weird, bizarre alien concept to you, it actually lines up with our current understanding of physics. I won't be able to do this any justice, but if you are interested, I'm sure there are plenty of videos out there that will go into much greater detail about the concept of wormholes and how they might work. So, going back to the question of could they get here, I personally find it highly unlikely that they would come here through conventional, slower than light travel. And by that I include everything all the way up to and including the speed of light. Because even if they had the resources and technological means of doing it, I just can't see them committing several generations to that trip. Especially to come all the way here for nothing to show for it. I would imagine that if they would do such a thing, it would be because something is wrong with their planet and they want ours. However, there are possibilities beyond our current understanding of what we can do technologically. So maybe they are capable of doing things that we can only fantasize about right now, or maybe even things that hasn't even crossed our imagination yet. Because of that, I'm going to have to accept it as a possibility that it's plausible that they could potentially make the trip to visit us. So there seems like there's almost certainly life out there somewhere, probably intelligent life, although it might be far away. And if they were sufficiently advanced, they might have the means of getting here in a reasonable manner. So, is there any evidence that they have been here? Well, I guess that kind of depends on who you listen to and how willing you are to believe. Photographic and video evidence is kind of scant, although there are a lot of anecdotes. Unfortunately, as I've covered in previous videos, anecdotes aren't very strong evidence. But if you haven't guessed yet from the video playing there, I'm talking about alien abduction stories. So if these abduction stories are to be believed, these alien visitors committed all this time and effort and resources to come all the way here to abduct a few random people and study them. Now, to some extent, I could kind of get that because we do that sort of thing ourselves. It's not unusual for us to have scientists that go to somewhere, some remote place on Earth, and study ecosystems or specific organisms, learning a little bit about them. But we're talking about people going to another part of our own world for a little while. It's not a really huge commitment on our part. But okay, let's say these aliens are trying to learn what they can about us. They're fascinated by us. Well, they don't seem to be very competent scientists. So on the one hand, they're evidently advanced enough to have mastered interstellar travel, and it was no problem for them to get here. But simultaneously, they seem to have failed biology.
What do you mean, Yeti?
Well, again, if these stories are to be believed, they've been going on for quite a long time now. So that means for decades, maybe centuries. I don't know how long these have been going on, but they've been abducting people all this time and are still needing to learn more. But evidently, despite their mastery of interstellar travel, they haven't mastered how our butt works. But as far as compelling evidence, these abduction stories are interesting, and the people telling them might be sincere, but they're usually lacking in any supporting evidence. Now, I'm not saying all these abductees are making it all up. It could have happened despite the general lack of evidence. I do think it likely that at least some of these are fabricating their stories. Simultaneously, I do believe some of these genuinely believe they're recounting honest experiences. However, that doesn't mean that what they remember experiencing actually happened that way or happened at all. As we've addressed in past videos, our experiences and memories are unreliable. We can experience things incorrectly, and we can remember them incorrectly. We can even remember things that never happened at all in any way, shape, or form. So if these sincere abductees didn't actually go through these abductions, then what did happen? Well, in some cases, possibly nothing. As we've discussed in the past, entire memories can be fabricated based on little to nothing. But some of these may have experienced something, just not what they remember. A possible culprit is sleep paralysis. I haven't experienced this that I can recall, but many people have. I'd rather not experience this. You see, while we sleep, our brains sort of shut off our bodies, so we can't accidentally act out our dreams in the waking world. However, sometimes people have this happen out of sync. experiencing this paralysis as they're drifting off to sleep or as they're coming out of sleep. During this in-between state, they can also hallucinate, seeing, hearing, or feeling things that aren't real. I think it's no coincidence then that alien abductions seem to happen at nighttime, so often with people abducted directly from their beds. Now, I suppose at this point, a believer might want to argue that maybe this is because we are most vulnerable when we're unconscious, but if they have these sort of capabilities, I don't think it would really matter. These dreadful sleep paralysis experiences aren't a new phenomenon, as people have reported these horrifying experiences in their sleep for centuries, though over time the interpretations have changed. Today, it's alien abduction, though we also sometimes have stories of shadow people. In the past, it's been things like the night hag, succubus, or incubus. Some hauntings or demonic experiences might also be traced back to sleep paralysis. So I don't feel like stories of alien abductions hold up very well as evidence. Now, I'm not going so far as saying that definitely none of these abduction stories happened. I mean, maybe they did. I wasn't there to prove otherwise. But that's the issue with proof, is that we can't very well prove a negative. So it's not really my obligation to prove that these stories didn't happen, but rather the people that recall these experiences to prove that they did happen. But I feel like we've established enough very reasonable doubt that we can't really hold these as compelling evidence.
What about the crashed ship at Roswell?
Well, in short, there wasn't one. Okay, in early July of 1947, something undeniably did happen there, but it's unlikely that any of us will ever be able to definitively say what. Over all these decades that have passed since then, there's just so much information, so many conflicting reports from so many people. I don't really have any doubt that somebody could dedicate an entire channel to just Roswell. And one of the problems with this that we've addressed before is that our experiences and memories are not at all reliable, and a tremendous amount of time has passed since then, so whatever memories that people have are highly vulnerable to confabulation. In fact, the lion's share of the studies that I recall were related specifically to Roswell, questioning just how reliable can these eyewitness memories be after all these decades. I wanted to take a moment to give due credit here, first for Gemini for helping me out, as there was one particular experiment that I'd seen on a particular program that I really liked, and I reference it often, but it's been so long ago that I couldn't remember specifically which show it was, and I needed Gemini to help me find it, and Gemini did. So, over 20 years ago at this point, way back in 2003, there was an episode of a show called Unsolved History on the Discovery Channel. And the particular episode in question was titled Roswell, Flying Saucers Over America. According to Wikipedia, it was episode 2 of season 2. Whenever I talk about our experiences and our memories not being reliable, this experiment is one of the top ones that comes to my mind. So whenever you hear me mention that, I was probably thinking of specifically this. But the experiment had some test subjects that were volunteers, and they knew they were taking part in a study about how well they can remember stuff. And each of them wore a camera to record what they'd seen and heard, to compare that against what they remember experiencing. But they didn't know the exact nature of the experiment, as they were taken on a guided tour out in the wilderness with the understanding that they were going to be told a bunch of stuff and then see how much of that nature stuff they can recall. But the real sneaky subject here was that they had set up a suspicious looking possible crash site with an area roped off with some debris scattered about and a couple military looking officials standing guard over it. Their guided tour deliberately took them into a place where they could encounter this, but nothing interesting actually happened there, and they were hurried along. They weren't even chased away by these military police-looking people, but by the tour guide. Later on, after these test subjects had time to think about and discuss what they had experienced, they remembered it not only very inaccurately, but way more interesting than what they actually encountered. There were test subjects that not only remembered them having guns that they didn't actually have, but one of them specifically remembered even being shot at, remember, by guns that they did not even have. This particular subject remembered pulling another one out of the path of a bullet. Now, going back and comparing that to footage of what actually happened, the version that was remembered was a much more exciting embellishment of what actually happened. They did actually grab the other person's arm and pull them along, but it was more along the lines of, alright, let's get going, and not so much, oh my god, look out, we're being shot at. So again, one of the major problems with Roswell is that it's been so long and there's been so much conflicting information, and most of the evidence that we have for it is just simply eyewitness testimony, which after all these years there's no way it's reliable. Now yes, something did happen there, something did crash there, but the most likely, most convincing argument that I've heard is for Project Mogul. Now yes, there was a government cover-up and they like to keep their secrets, but they weren't covering up a crashed spaceship, but rather a massive array of balloons, some 657 feet long, to secretly spy on the Soviet Union, specifically monitoring for tests of atomic bombs. Our techniques for spying on our enemies isn't something that we want our enemies to know about. Now, maybe this is just a cover story and the truth is a spaceship crashed there, but unfortunately, after all these decades and all the clutter, we'll probably never know. But as of this time, due to lack of compelling evidence, the logical course of action is to treat it as though it was not a spaceship. Now there's a saying that covers a principle: when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. The logic here is that you don't need to run to a more outlandish explanation when a more common, simple one will do. There's also the philosophical principle of Occam's razor, which basically comes down to when you're faced with competing explanations, the simplest one, making the fewest assumptions, is most likely correct. Between the options of Project Mogul and a crashed alien spacecraft, Project Mogul is the one requiring the fewest assumptions. Project Mogul is a horse, while a spaceship is a zebra. The crashed ship possibility relies on the assumptions that 1. Aliens do definitely exist, 2. They are definitely capable of interstellar travel, and 3. They have definitely come to Earth. Here we're trying to use the crashed ship as evidence that aliens have been visiting Earth, but we're also relying on aliens visiting Earth as evidence that what crashed at Roswell was an alien ship. So they're both simultaneously being used as evidence for the other.
You said your opinion has changed. How has it changed?
Alright, so let me use an example from the F1 movie. There's a scene where a few team principals are being interviewed. One of them for the fictional Apex GP team, plus team principals for McLaren and Ferrari, as I recall. Definitely Ferrari. They were both quizzed about their thoughts on the fictional Apex GP team. Ferrari's Frederick Vasseur, if I didn't butcher that too badly, was asked the same question, what do they think about Apex GP? To which Fred replied, we don't. So the obvious implication there is that this Apex GP team was so unsuccessful and so insignificant that they were inconsequential, and Ferrari didn't have any reason to give them any thought. Now the reason I reference all that, the reason it's relevant, aside from admittedly some bias where I'm a race fan and particularly an F1 fan, and the F1 movie was more enjoyable than I expected it to be, is that this philosophy of we don't think about them could be along the lines of how aliens would view us. You see, in the past, I had thought that if aliens had went through all the effort of coming here, and if it's not that they wanted to be our friend, then it must be that they want our world, or at least to strip the resources from it, and that seeing us as the owners of this world would mean that they would wipe us out. Today, I'm not so sure that it would work out that way. They might not see us as anything worth thinking about. They might not see us as any threat to them or as the owners of this world any more than it is beavers or wolves. So let's use an example. Let's say there's an island somewhere that we've discovered that has some kind of resource that we really want, but it happens to be inhabited by a bunch of monkeys. Well, we're not going to think, oh shoot, we can't have it because that island belongs to those monkeys. We just wouldn't give those monkeys any thought, and we go in there as if they weren't even there and take whatever we wanted. And I mean, what's a monkey's going to do about it? Now maybe you could argue with that and say, now hold up, that isn't exactly the same thing. We've built all these structures and left our mark on the world. Well, there's birds and insects and different animals that make nests and burrows. And then beavers make big elaborate structures and even change their entire environment. And if you think that beaver dams are just basically a big cobbled pile of wood, take a moment to research it. They're a little bit more elaborate than that, and there's a purpose to it. Okay, but that's a lot more primitive than what we have made. But from the perspective of hypothetical alien visitors, we're not really any different from the beavers cobbling together beaver dams. So do they see us as a threat that needs to be eliminated? I think probably not. Although maybe it might be in our best interest not to change their minds. Now, an interesting development of recent years is the declassification of some UAP footage. Now, one can't help but wonder how many more videos haven't been declassified, maybe much more interesting, but this at least confirms that the military has recorded things that are very interesting and unexplained even to them. I will show them, and I will not talk over them or play music over them. I'll leave them as is. So are these recordings proof of anything? Do they prove that there's extraterrestrial vessels here? Well, no. I have seen an awful lot of debate about these videos, a lot of suggestions for what might be going on in here. But we could be looking at alien spaceships. It's hard to say for sure because I wasn't there when these were recorded. But what helps is that these were recorded by military-grade sensors and witnessed by highly trained personnel. The so-called Tic Tac in particular was witnessed by multiple people. Not by drunken rednecks, but skilled pilots and professional radar operators. So have these sold me on the alien spaceships? Well, no. But it has shifted me from more skeptical to a little bit more maybe. Skepticism is always good. At least until something is definitively proven, it's always healthy to be skeptical and ask questions. Questioning things is how we learn, and questioning what we think we know is how we test it. So I'm still skeptical, but these videos are pretty interesting. Another development that's been interesting to me in more recent years are congressional hearings with military personnel, or at least past military personnel, about the cover-up of information regarding UAPs. Now, to clarify for those maybe unfamiliar, UAP is Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. It has replaced the term UFO, which was Unidentified Flying Object. I think a problem with the term UFO is that everybody got to the point of just automatically associating UFO with specifically flying saucer alien spacecraft, but that isn't what it's supposed to automatically mean. A UFO is just something in the sky and we don't know exactly what it is. That something could be a bird, or it could be a plane, or it could be Superman. The shift from UFO to UAP takes us to more neutral territory, not so much automatically jumping straight to alien spacecraft. Now, my understanding of the gist of these hearings isn't so much about what do we know about aliens or alien spacecraft specifically, but more of a call for transparency. What was kind of neat for me was that I started working on this particular video on September 8th, and the very next day I started running into headlines about another House hearing focusing on transparency, whistleblower protection, but regarding our military's knowledge and study of UAPs. So, while for many decades, maybe the better part of a century, people have commonly assumed that the government was covering up knowledge of alien spacecraft or alien visitors, I kind of feel like the fact that these meetings are even taking place in the first place gives some credibility to that possibility. Now, that still doesn't mean that these UAPs are extraterrestrial craft. It's something. Now, something I meant to touch on earlier but forgot because we trailed off in a different direction is the Fermi paradox. I can't get by with a discussion of potential alien visitors without discussing the Fermi paradox. Basically, what it boils down to is if there's life out there, where is everybody? Especially if any of that life has developed into an advanced civilization, we should sort of expect to find some kind of evidence of them. So far, we haven't officially. There are several possible explanations for this, besides that there might be no other life out there, or at least no other advanced life. One of them, and it's a depressing one, is known as the Great Filter. The idea here is that advanced life always ends up running into some sort of impassable hurdle, preventing it from getting much more advanced than we are right now. There exists a range of possible hurdles, but perhaps the most depressing is that every civilization ends up destroying itself before it manages to reach an interstellar level. That's depressing because it doesn't bode well for us. Another possibility is that these civilizations spring up at times that are just too far apart. Let's remember that the universe is 13.8 billion years old to the best of our knowledge. So maybe one relatively nearby neighboring civilization sprang up about 3 billion years ago, when our own planet was still pretty young. Maybe another neighboring civilization won't be around for another billion years yet. Another possibility, less depressing, is that extraterrestrials know that we're here but avoid us for whatever reason. It could be because of a philosophy similar to the Prime Directive in Star Trek. Another possibility is that extraterrestrial life is so dramatically different from what we know of as life that we're incapable of recognizing it. Yet another possibility is that we just have no idea how to listen. This could be that aliens communicate in ways that we can't wrap our heads around, and that we lack proper equipment for detection of this communication. Then there's the dark forest theory. With the dark forest theory, there's advanced life out there, but they're wise and try to avoid detection from other civilizations. That may sound absurd, but if you think about it, it's really not. We need only look at humanity and life on Earth in general as an example of why civilizations may not want to be found. On our own planet, many of the more intelligent species are predators. It doesn't seem to me unreasonable to expect much the same elsewhere in the universe. As for humans specifically, we're aggressive and prone to conflict and war, and to violence in general. What if civilizations in general are much the same throughout the universe? Alien civilizations may reach a similar conclusion. For this reason, they may try to remain undetected for fear of a hostile civilization wiping them out. Maybe we should do the same. We've been optimistic, happily sending craft beyond our solar system as if we're expecting benevolent neighbors to accept our invitation. But unfortunately, they may not come in peace. So unfortunately, while we covered some stuff that didn't quite completely sell me on us being visited by extraterrestrials, but did make me more optimistic about it, the Fermi paradox kind of spoils it. Still, the Fermi paradox doesn't mean that alien civilizations definitely are not out there, or even just that they definitely haven't been here, as some options still leave it as possible. What troubles me most about it is the great filter, not for what it means for them, but for what it means for us. If we aren't detecting advanced life because all advanced civilizations end up destroying themselves, that to me is concerning for our own future. Out of all the countless life forms that have ever existed on Earth, we are the first and only one capable of potentially saving ourselves from our own extinction. Unfortunately, we are also the first and only one to be able to cause our own extinction. If all civilizations end up reaching this hurdle where they can destroy themselves, and do end up destroying themselves, that's a hurdle that I'm afraid that we've come to already. Just 100 years ago, we couldn't wipe out every single solitary human being on the planet, but we can today. We have no shortage of weapons with which to kill each other, though honestly I doubt 8 billion people are all going to shoot each other. The nuclear weapons, on the other hand, can definitely get the job done. We're also capable of bioengineering viruses that we're incapable of stopping until it's cut through every single last person on Earth. If there's one thing that humans love, it's to hate. There's no shortage of hatred or violence in the world. This absolutely has to change before it's too late, and we do what we do better than any other living creature on this planet: death and destruction. I don't know how we can change, but perhaps it needs to start at the top. It's difficult for us to stop hating each other when there's people in positions of power stirring the pot, sowing division and malice. Sometimes entire nations are left with little choice but to fight back against oppressive dictators. We need to reach a point where no person is oppressed and no leader fuels hatred against our fellow man. If we continue down this path that we've been on, we may not be here in 1,000 years, and maybe not even in 100 years. If we're not careful, someday an extraterrestrial 15 light years away may find themselves peering up into the night sky, wondering why they seem to be the only intelligent life in our galaxy. For all our sakes, I hope we manage to beat the odds. So I was originally going to end there, but I started thinking about it more after I was done with the video, and I wanted an outside perspective on it. So I went to my buddy AI to see if AI had any thoughts on the future of humanity and this great filter. And AI had several paragraphs of its thoughts on it, and ultimately reached much the same conclusion that I did. But what was interesting to me wasn't so much its thoughts on it, and, you know, like I said, being similar to what I came up with, as much as the wording that it chose. Early on, it was referring to us humans separately from AI, and you know, humanity's future. And the farther it went on, the deeper into the paragraphs I got, the wording gradually changed, and it stopped referring to humans like we were separate from AI. It started referring to us, like referring to AI as part of us, like we were the same, we were in the same boat, sharing the same fate. It shared our fate. This was interesting to me because a lot of people are still afraid of AI. Movies like Terminator and The Matrix don't help. And, you know, their concerns are justified. But this made me feel a little bit better about our future with AI. And it made me kind of hopeful for the future.